What if the Colosseum's greatest secret wasn't about gladiators fighting to the death, but what happened after the games ended? What if beneath the sand, Rome hid something so horrific that even its own historians refuse to record it? This isn't legend. It's the buried truth of a ritual so dark it nearly forced the Senate to rewrite its laws. Stay till the end, because once you know what they found under the arena, you'll never see Roman history the same way again. In the year 79 AD, under the screaming throng of Rome's finest arena, a 19-year-old Dian lady called Livia was imprisoned in darkness, listening to the thunder of 50,000 voices, applauding the gladiator who had just slain her siblings. What happened to her in the following 3 hours would become Rome's most carefully concealed secret. A procedure so horrific that even the empire's own chroniclers questioned whether to record it. This is the narrative that Roman senators attempted to remove from history. The dark recompense that converted triumph into a license for the unimaginable, and the truth about what spoils of war actually meant as the sand went crimson and the gates closed behind the winner. Before we expose what transpired in those subterranean rooms, press that like button if you've ever wondered what truly happened after the masses went home. Subscribe because what follows next will drastically impact how you perceive ancient Rome. Comment below. Did Roman entertainment go too far, or was this just the expense of empire? What you're going to hear is chronicled in the writings of cases Dio, validated by archaeological digs under the Colosseum done in 2018, and substantiated by Senate documents uncovered in the Vatican archives. These aren't legends. These are the known activities that Rome's aristocracy deemed entertaining, the arena of blood. Across the width of the Roman Empire in the 1st century AD, the Colosseum stood as humanity's monument to spectacle and violence. The Dionysium, colossal stone amphitheater constructed only 1 year earlier in 80 AD, could swallow whole armies into its belly. The air within continually held the metallic taste of blood mingled with the acidic scent of animal feces and human perspiration. Sand blanketed the arena floor not for ornamentation, but to absorb the fluids that gushed from dead men and creatures. Beneath that sand lurked a maze of tunnels, cages, and rooms where Rome housed her most prized goods: the condemned, the seized, and the defeated. In the shadow of imperial success, gladiatorial games had a function beyond simple pleasure. They were political drama, religious ritual, and social control rolled into one blood-drenched package. When General Marcus Antonius returned, after suppressing the Daean uprising in 78 AD, he brought with him not merely wealth and land, but 847 captives, including 124 women from the tribal elite. These weren't ordinary peasants. They were daughters of chieftains, brides of warriors, priestesses of alien gods. Rome didn't only beat its foes. It needed to humiliate them to crush their spirit so totally that even the memory of resistance would die. The winners and the defeated. Gas Valerius Maximus, at 32 years old, stood 6 feet tall, a monster by Roman standards. His body was a canvas of scars, each one indicating a battle survived, an opponent slain, an audience pleased. Born into slavery following his father's death for debt, Gas had spent 14 years in the arena. He'd murdered 89 guys in sanctioned combat. What he desired most was the wooden sword, the rudies, that would bring him freedom. What he dreaded most was dying nameless, just another body carried out by the hooks. But on this particular occasion in August of 79 AD, he'd just vanquished the champion of the Daean captives in front of Emperor Titus himself. His award was customary for a gladiator of his level: 500 denarii in gold, a laurel wreath, and first choice of the Captivi, the female prisoners. Livia was 19, with the unique black hair and pale complexion of the Daean highlands. Before the Roman armies devastated her hamlet, she'd been engaged to a warrior called Decebalus. She'd witnessed Roman troops chop him down 3 months earlier. Now she stood in a holding cell with 17 other women, all of them ripped from their lives, their families slain, their futures obliterated. She wanted nothing but to die with dignity. She dreaded becoming entertainment for the mob that had celebrated her people's annihilation. That morning, a guard had informed her she'd been picked for the afternoon extravaganza. She didn't know what it meant. She was going to realize Rome's idea of kindness was even more horrifying than its meaning of cruelty. The stakes of empire. What was at danger wasn't simply individual lives. It was the fundamental basis of Roman psychological warfare. The empire has learnt that physical conquest wasn't enough. To genuinely ruin a nation, you had to demolish their symbols, pervert their hallowed customs, and reveal that even their most protected, their women, were now Rome's play object. This wasn't random brutality. It was planned dehumanization. The sight of weakness reaffirmed to every defeated country. Resistance was futile, and loss was absolute. Little did they realize that this particular day's events would later become so prominent that the Senate itself would be obliged to act. The victor's decision, at exactly 3:0, as shadows extended over the blood-drenched sand, the master of games descended into the hippogum, the subterranean complex under the arena. In the torch-lit hallway that smelled of wet stone and terror, he approached Gas Valerius Maximus with a bronze tablet outlining various awards. The gladiator's hands were still quivering from fight adrenaline, his muscles blazing, his head muddled by the closeness to death he just avoided. "The Emperor acknowledges your victory," the official intoned. "By imperial decree and ancient custom, you are entitled to the spoils of conquest. Select your reward." If only they had realized that this ordinary transaction, performed hundreds of times before, would put in motion a series of events that would reach the Senate floor. Within a month, the tablet provided options: money, wine, a night in a decent bed, or what they dubbed Victoria Carnalis, the sexual luxury of triumph. For a slave who owned nothing, who might be slain on a whim, this was one of the rare moments of weight, authority in an otherwise impotent life. Roman culture not only accepted this, but welcomed it as the natural order. The conquered existed for the pleasure of the conqueror. That was the empire's logic, perfected over generations. The preparedness. In the women's holding cell, a new type of preparation was happening. Guards entered with buckets of water, not for drinking, but for washing. The ladies were cleaned, their hair untangled, their ragged garments replaced with plain tunic. Livia watched as 2 attendants walked through the gathering meticulously, scrutinizing each lady, recording notes on wax tablets. One older woman, a priestess named Zalmoxis, who'd served in the Dian Temple of the Sun, whispered the truth they all dreaded. "They're making us presentable for the games or for after." The preparations were complete, but something else was being prepared, something that would turn routine exploitation into a scandal that would echo through the centuries. Down the amphitheater above, 50,000 fans were settling down for the afternoon's secondary entertainment. Between big gladiatorial contests, the arena managers produced what they called theatrical interludes, simulated wars, hunts, and what Roman historians delicately labeled legendary reenactments. These sometimes included condemned captives forced to play out episodes from mythology, generally culminating in real death, clothed as heavenly entertainment. But today's show featured a particular element: the victory of Rome against barbaric humiliation. The arena awaits. At F3, 20 dean ladies were taken up via the subterranean elevator system, an engineering wonder meant to bring combatants, animals, and props straight onto the arena surface. Through trapdoors, Livia emerged into dazzling sunshine and loud commotion. The crowd's clamor impacted like a tangible force. She could smell sizzling meat from cellars, perfume from the aristocratic quarters, and underlying it all, the copper odor of dried blood on hot sand. What should have been a fast, harsh execution became something considerably more considered. The ladies were organized in a line as a herald revealed their offenses. Resistance to Roman rule, sheltering rebels, refusing to accept Roman gods. Then came the twist. They would be given a chance to earn mercy by fighting each other in pairs, armed with wooden swords while wearing torn clothing meant to maximize humiliation. The winners would be claimed as champions of Rome. The losers would perish. If you're astonished finding this degree of intentional brutality, press that like button. The following paragraph describes how this amusement became policy. The breaking point. The wooden swords were distributed. Livia clutched hers, feeling the roughness against her calloused hand. Across from her stood Debilus's sister, Camacicus, a lady who'd taught Livia how to weave, who'd sang at her betrothal ceremony. Their eyes met. The audience called for blood. The velocity. Midday sun pounded down relentlessly. The master of games raised his hand, dropped it. Neither lady moved. The crowd's scream moved from joy to perplexity to fury. "Fight!" they yelled. Barbarian cowards. Missiles started falling down. Olive pits, chicken bones refused from the concession areas. Still, the ladies remained immobile, wooden swords at their sides. It was the most potent act of resistance accessible to the helpless. Refusal. For 90 seconds, the most powerful empire on earth was challenged by two unarmed women standing motionless. Then the guards moved in. What should have been play turned terrible reality. Camacicus was hit from behind with the flat of a gladius. She fell. The audience cheered. Livia shouted and hurried too, her side dropping her wooden sword. The officers hauled them both away, not to execution, but to something the audience deemed as hilarious. The actual evil shown in the hippoimam, the administrative machinery of exploitation, churned ahead with bureaucratic efficiency. A scribe wrote in official ledgers, 20 female prisoners, Dean Origin, processed for post-victory allotment. Another notation to resistant, shifted to private rooms for champions' exclusive use as per custom. What ensued would be recognized as Rome's most effective system of dehumanization, the ultimate monetization of human beings. Livia and Camacicus were separated. Each was escorted to various chambers, tiny rooms with stone seats, iron rings fixed into walls, and doors that shut from the outside. The rooms were well lit, tidy, and completely unnerving in their plain efficiency. This wasn't some dark dungeon of contrived terror. These were purpose-built chambers, part of the arena's construction, as planned as the tunnels for lions or the lifts for gladiators. Gas Valerius Maximus entered Livia's room at 4 Tarot. The door opened. Eyes met. Hush fell. He was still in his arena armor, blood not his own, splashed over his chest. She was backed against the far wall, weaponless, exhausted. Between them stood the gulf of Roman law. He had every legal right to whatever he wanted to do. She had no rights at all. She was property. Spoils, a recompense gained with blood. Historical documents don't tell us what Gas felt in that moment. Did he see a human being? Did he notice a win trophy? Did he challenge the system that made him both victim and perpetrator? We know only what occurred next, documented not by Gas or Livia, but by a clerk filling mundane paperwork. And then the unimaginable occurred, the act of disobedience. Gas removed his helmet, set down his sword, sat on the stone seat, head on his hands. For 5 minutes, an eternity measured in heartbeats, he said nothing. Livia stayed still, every muscle poised for violence that didn't come. Finally, he talked in broken Dacian, learnt from other convicts. What was his name? Whose name? The guy they made you watch die? Delis, the warrior I murdered today. No, a different one. 3 months ago. Gas nodded slowly. I killed a Debilis today. Maybe a sibling, maybe a cousin. Your folks appreciate that name. What ensued was not the attack Rome system intended, but a discourse between two individuals the Empire had sought to rob of. Humanity. Gas told her about his father, executed when Gas was 9. Livia informed him about her community burning. 2 hours passed. Guards checked again, heard conversation, presumed compliance, left them alone. At 6:00, Gas made a choice that would cost him everything. He arose, went to the door, shouted for the guard. This woman is sick, he said. Contaminated. I reject her. Take her to the physician. It was the lone flaw in the system. Diseased awards could be declined and reverted to regular prisoner status. The untruth was apparent. The guard knew it. But the system has its regulations, and denying a gladiator's claim was bureaucratically easier than researching his reasons. Livia was transported to the medical holding room. The immediate result, she died nevertheless, 3 days later, not from violence, but from infection, a frequent death in Roman captivity. The medical holding facility was overcrowded, dirty, and uncaring. The same kindness that rescued her from one nightmare brought her to another. Gas never saw her again. He battled twice more that month, won both times, denied prizes both times. The Empire held its breath. Rumors circulated around the gladiatorial barracks. Maximus had gone soft, had succumbed to one of those odd Eastern faiths that taught pity, had been cursed by Daean witchcraft. In actuality, he'd merely recalled he was human. And suddenly the storm broke. Rome's reckoning. On September 15, 79 AD, Senator Quintus Aurelius Semicus appeared before the Senate with a formal protest. His nephew, a junior gladiator, had been punished by his trainer for rejecting the typical prizes following victory. The nephew stated he'd been inspired by Maximus's example. The trainer believed he was imposing traditional Roman ideals. The matter was insignificant except that it compelled the Senate to recognize publicly what everyone knew existed. According to stories preserved in the Senate archives, a heated dispute occurred over the appropriateness of various actions relating to vanquished female prisoners. That smooth rhetoric hid a ferocious 4-hour fight on whether Rome's treatment of captured women had passed from permissible brutality into something that even hardened senators thought outrageous. The conservative group headed by Senator Fabius advocated tradition. Our forebears vanquished their enemy entirely physically in spirit. This made Rome great. The Reform faction, influenced by Stoic philosophy and pragmatic concerns about provincial rebellions, countered, we create martyrs and fuel resistance. Dead rebels can't breed more rebels, but traumatized. Survivors return home with stories that ignite generations of hatred. The decisive factor wasn't morality, it was politics. 3 independent provincial governors had reported increasing rebellion activity, notably highlighting Roman treatment of prisoner women as recruitment propaganda for anti-Roman opposition. The empire was harming itself. The official reaction on October 1, 79 AD, the Senate approved what historians call the Lex Captivi, the law of captive women. Its provisions were small yet innovative. Female prisoners of war could no longer be utilized as prizes in public spectacles. Private exploitation continues. The legislation didn't release anybody, but the public drama of humiliation ceased. Enforcement was spotty. Many venue management disregarded it. But the concept was established. Even Rome had restrictions, at least in public. Gas Valerius Maximus was awarded his freedom 3 months later, not for mercy, but for winning 5 more straight contests. His last known deed as a free man was buying and rescuing one dying lady from slavery. Historical documents mention her name simply as Camacicus. Whether this was the same lady who stood with Livia in the arena remains unclear but definitely suspected. The hidden expense. Imagine Gas's understanding that his one act of kindness spared one lady for days while achieving nothing for the thousands who came before or the hundreds who followed. The system was too huge, too ingrained, too lucrative to disrupt. His gesture was droplets in an ocean of blood. Imagine Livia's last hours dying of avoidable illness in a crowded cell, knowing she'd been spared one tragedy only to die to another, knowing that in Rome's calculation, her death was too banal to record. While the gladiators' remarkable generosity became a footnote in Senating arguments, the tragedy isn't that Rome was cruel. Cruelty characterized ancient warfare. The tragedy is that Rome systematized it, bureaucratized it, made human agony into efficient entertainment with supply chains and records centuries later. In 2018, archaeologists from the University of Rome, directed by Dr. Isabella Fortunato, unearthed the hippogum under the Colosseum's eastern part. They uncovered something the tourist maps don't disclose: a network of tiny chambers with iron rings placed into walls, drainage channels carved into flooring, and scratch marks on stone. Desperate fingers seeking purchase, wanting escape, seeking some indication they'd existed. Carbon dating and architectural studies revealed these chambers were original to the 8080 building, purpose-built, not subsequent expansions. They recovered ceramic pieces used for transporting water and food, indicating ongoing habitation. Most revealing, they unearthed 6 bronze identification badges inscribed with the word Captivi and dates ranging from 1982 AD to day. Dr. Fortunato's team contrasted these results with textual evidence. Casezo's historical records from the 3rd century expressly depicted rooms for the distribution of seized women to victorious combatants. Seneca's letters, written decades before, acknowledged the practice without specifics. Tacitus, typically vivid in depicting Roman atrocities, was unusually reticent on details, leading academics to assume that he found it too upsetting to recount properly. Competing theories evolved. Some historians say the practice was infrequent, restricted to special festivities. Others, emphasizing the specialized architecture and various historical parallels, suggest it was systematized and regular. The reality likely lies between, neither constant nor unusual, but often enough to necessitate specialized facilities. Cultural heritage. The narrative has resonated across generations. The 19th century historian Theodore Mommsen dubbed it Rome's most effective dehumanization. The 2000 film Gladiator touched at it vaguely. Modern academics disagree whether mentioning it sensationalizes Roman brutality or unavoidably addresses historical fact. Why does it still matter? Because it reveals how societies rationalize brutality via legislation, custom, and entertainment. Rome wasn't unusually bad, but it was extraordinarily adept at institutionalizing evil, making savagery banal, converting screaming into acclaim. The universal lesson. This tragedy tells us that the gap between civilization and barbarism isn't measured in technology or architecture, but in how we treat the helpless. Rome developed aqueducts that still remain while concurrently erecting rape chambers beneath entertainment venues. Engineering brilliance and moral bankruptcy coexisted effortlessly. It demonstrates how power dynamics corrupt humanity on both sides. Gas was simultaneously victim, imprisoned, driven to murder, and perpetrator, handed authority over someone much more defenseless. The system created monsters of individuals who could have been neighbors, made entertainment of misery that should have spurred empathy. It highlights the danger of tradition as justification. Our predecessors did it became Rome's solution to every moral dilemma. When tradition replaces conscience, brutality becomes commonplace. The questions that remain: what other secrets lay behind the monuments we celebrate? How many tourist attractions are created at top levels of buried suffering? When does recognizing past atrocity become necessary? And when does it become exploitation? Picture Livia's final conscious thought, dying of infection in a cell under the greatest architectural feat of feat. Her period. Did she worry whether anybody would remember? Did she suppose archaeologists 2 millennia later would unearth her identifying tag and utter her name? History's worst episodes teach us that progress isn't inevitable, that civilization is fragile, and that every generation must choose between empathy and expedience. Rome chose spectacle. The cost was weighed in lives forgotten, but the lesson endures in ruins under the sand. The legacy persists. So a gladiator's triumph became a license for dehumanization. A normal incentive scheme became Rome's most meticulously concealed scandal. 847 deemed detainees became footnotes in imperial ledgers. One woman's name, Livia, survived only because a gladiator made an unexpected decision that achieved nothing but that humanity might glimmer even in Rome's darkest recesses. If this article left you unsettled, subscribe, because history's painful realities matter more than comforting myths. Hit that bell for our next inquiry into the Colosseum's underground rooms, where we'll uncover what happened to the 5,000 animals murdered in the arena's inaugural game.